Everyone makes mistakes. And the goal of a mistake is to, one, not repeat it again, but two, to learn from the mistakes of others so that you can bypass any of their failures or their shortcomings so that you can be better. But as we go through each new year, oftentimes we find ourselves repeating these same mistakes over and over again. So I want to safeguard you from 5 mistakes that even seasoned style guys make so that you can show up as the best version of yourself this year. Let's step into a dressing room. People think of a mistake as a wrongdoing, but I think of a mistake as a missed take. Every man has a story, and that story soon becomes history or his story. And so that means we are authoring our own voice, our own perspective, and our own narrative. And sometimes we got to edit or re edit. And when we are presenting ourselves and we're showing people who we are, sometimes we have to take a step back and retake how we presented ourselves. Now, yes, there are some mistakes that can be life altering, but as long as you have breath in your lungs, you have the opportunity to pivot, to reassess what you did, to reflect on it, and then to reassert yourself, right? And so I want to encourage you, as I continue to encourage myself in making pivots, to show up as the best version of ourselves. Let's talk about these 5 missed takes. Actually, there's 5 more mistakes that guys, even well-dressed guys, commonly make. So if you've made one or all 5 of them, give yourself some grace and take a step back and know that you can always show up, maybe even in a different scene or scenario, as this better version of yourself. I had a client who came in when I was just starting to do image consulting, and he had just graduated from college. He was going to be getting a pretty well-paying job, and so he wanted to get his first custom suit. And I was excited because he was a young guy, new, fresh upstart. And so we went through some different fabrics and materials. And I was showing him gray and blue suits that were nondescript, pretty plain. And I settled on this beautiful flannel gray suit that would give him a lot of use. When I showed it to him, he kind of made the face like, man, I don't want that. And I asked him why. He was like, man, it's too boring. And I said, yes, I understand what you're saying, but this will allow you to wear this over and over and over again without anybody noticing what it is that you're wearing. And he said, that's not what I want. I want something that's bold and that people will remember. And when I tried to advise him on the other side of that, what that was going to cost him, he was like, I don't care. This is what I want. So 6 weeks later, the suit comes in. We try it on. It fits him great. And he's like, okay, well, how do I wear this? So we start talking about some different shirt options that he can put together. And he starts to hesitate. And I said, well, why are you hesitating? He said, because now I'm feeling a little self-conscious. This is really bold. And this is the missed take that a lot of guys make, even well-seasoned guys. They always go after what they want instead of what they need. They don't think about how they need to utilize their items, their pieces, for their benefit, how they can leverage their look to help them progress into the spaces and places that they want to be. It is stylistically important that we make proper investments on our needs first and then start moving to our wants. But here's the dope secret about this. If you pay attention to your needs, it's usually in alignment with what you actually ultimately want. So for instance, if you want to be a sartorialist, a sartorial guy, you need a great suit. And that suit is going to still get you access to all the cool places and spaces that you want to be in because you can take off a tie or you can wear a tie. And then after that, you need a great blazer like I have right here. Doesn't have to be blue, it could be green, it could be burgundy. And you start to realize that when you have these things, you still get the compliments, you still get the proper attention, the right types of interactions, and people want to be around you. So you still get what you want, but you are satisfying your needs and you can benefit from that way more. Now, unfortunately, my client at the time had to superficially suffer through that. And when he came back, you better believe that he got a understated navy suit, since he already had a loud gray one. Saw the benefit of supplying his need instead of his want. So the next mistake is something that a lot of guys don't really think that they need to know until they need to know it. And that's not knowing your measurements. So a lot of guys will know if they wear a small, medium, large, or if they wear 32, 34, 36, 38 when it comes to their jeans, but then they don't know what type of jacket size that they wear. And on a deeper level, they don't know what type of jacket size that they wear based off of who's making it. So an American size 40 is going to fit very different than a European size 40, which is going to fit very different from a Asian style size 40. But what if you want a Asian manufactured jacket or a European manufactured jacket? Then you're going to want to know where your measurements are. So if you're shopping online, you can go to their fit guide and know whether you need a large or extra large depending on the make. So I always advise all of my clients to get measurements. Now you should have a full range of your measurements, not only your chest measurements, but your overarm, your abdomen, your waist, your seat, your thigh, if you can, as well as your wrist measurements and your bicep measurements. The more that you have, the better it is going to be for you. And when you do this, you're not wasting time, money, or getting upset when something that you really like gets to your house and doesn't fit you. All right, your grandpop, you guys got grandpops. Is it pops? Your papa, pop, whoever it was, right? Or your father even would go to a haberdashery or a retail shop or a big box store and would get 5 suits. They would get a black, they would get a gray, they would get a navy, they would get one pattern, and then they often would get a brown suit as well. And even if they just did 3 of those, they knew if they got 5 to 10 shirts to start out and a couple of ties, a black and a brown shoe, they were set for the year. They didn't really have to think about anything because that was what their fathers had told them and the fathers before them had told them. And whether you were stylish or not stylish, that was pretty much the uniform look. And so because of that, guys have become accustomed to just following the thing that is uniform. This is why you hear a lot of influencers or style guys telling you the 5 to 10 things that every guy should have. Because in their mind, they are still practicing from that old time narrative. But in truth, and in the modern society, guys are in all different types of workspaces as well as social spaces that are much more casual, much more diverse than ever before. And despite what people may think, if you show up in a suit and tie in some very high funded or high yield businesses, that can actually look too serious and it can create a space or a energy of tension and discomfort because they're asking, why are you coming in so serious when we were just going to have a conversation about where the company is or what it's doing? When I talk to clients, that's one of their main concerns is not being too serious in a casual work environment now. So when you're listening to what every guy needs, you're not every guy. You're trying to figure out what is most appropriate that will make you look more competent and will easily transition from work to play. And so, because of this, you have to think about your needs. You have to think about the spaces that you often find yourself in socially, professionally, and romantically, especially if you're dating, how you're going to move around in those spaces, and then feel those needs, not your wants, for how you're going to move. Be careful about listening to the guys who says that every man should have these things. They may not be of interest or of benefit to you, and then you just got a whole lot of BS in your closet that you can't really do anything with because it doesn't work for any aspect of your life. We all, for a time, were seeing everywhere, if you were on any style blog or on Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, that whole adage of every man needs 5 suits. You get 3 shirts and You can mix and match all of these suits. And while I respect the hell out of Steve Harvey for what he's accomplished on a business level, he is not a style guy. Does he have some fashion sense? Of course. But he's not a style guy. And I took the same issue with him when he wrote the book Think Like a Man or Act Like a Lady, Think Like a Man, or however that book goes. And it was because he was not a relationship guy. He was just speaking on his opinion, and a lot of his advice was problematic because there was no nuance there. And when we start thinking about these different individuals, whether it's him from a style standpoint or from any of these so called relationship gurus who are not even following the standards and mandates that they've set for themselves, I run into this mistake. And this is something that even the most seasoned or cool guys fall prey to. And that is following people who aren't taking you where you want to go. I always like to say that you have to be careful with who you're following because they are leading you somewhere. But if it's not to the goals and to the spaces that you want to be, why would you follow them? And when it comes to style, even if it's not me, find the people who will lead you where you want to go. If you want to be a sartorial guy, follow the sartorial guys. If you're thinking about your silent luxury type of look, follow those guys who do it well. If you are looking for a rocker, cool, sporty, athleisure type of look, follow these guys who will help get you there. Be careful about who you're following. Again, they're leading you somewhere, and make sure it's to the place that you want to be. All right, so this mistake happens to a lot of us, right? And it's even happened to me from time to time. And it was best represented with the client that I was working with. So he comes in, he's like, man, hey, I need to get a dope velvet jacket for an upcoming party. I was like, bet, I got you. We got some time to do a custom. So here's what I'm thinking, and here's how much it is going to cost. And he was like, looked at the price, looked at the style, and was like, hell no. It's too bland and boring for that amount of money. I got a homie who can do it for the cheap, and so I'm going to go with him. Say less, bro. Appreciate you for giving me the opportunity. We keep it moving. Now, 2 months later, I see him after he's already gone to the party, and he's mad at me. And I'm feeling like 50 Cent.
I'm like, what do you say fuck me for?
And he's like laughing, but he's like, bro, why did you let me go out like that? I said, you made a choice. I just respected it. And he was like, man, I got attention, which is what I wanted, but it was for all the wrong reasons. So I, much like you may be, am confused. I'm like, well, what happened? So he shows me the picture. And it is this crushed blue velvet jacket that is a louder color than I was gonna go with. It's ill fitting. It doesn't really work. But he's like, yo, I got some compliments, and then some people looking at me kind of weird. And I said, well, why were they looking at you weird after some other people were complimenting me? And he was like, it was because it was somebody else's birthday. It was a birthday party that he was going to. And even if you get the style right, a lot of people make the mistake of trying to be the loudest person in the room. But Frank Lucas said it best. The loudest person is often the weakest person in the room. Now, here's the misconception here when it comes to loudness. I'm not saying you can't have flair. I'm not saying that you can't be a little bit avant-garde with your style. But that doesn't mean that you have to draw all of the attention, so that the people who do encounter you really appreciate what it is that you're wearing. A guy that I admire, really stylish gentleman, has this suit, and it is navy blue, but it has these faint red stripes in them. They're so faint that it almost makes the suit look violet. And even in the daylight, you can't tell what the color is. It just draws your attention, but it's still very understated and actually quite professional. So if you was to wear this out to an event or to go out to dinner in it, nobody's going to really see anything outside of a dark, potentially blue suit. It's not until you get under a light at a dinner table or he leans in at the bar that you'll see all of the nuance and the beauty in that suit. So don't make the mistake of thinking that you have to be loud in order to be remembered or to be stylish. There are all these other nuances that can help you really be the most memorable person in the room, even if you're the quietest. So the next mistake that a lot of guys, even well-dressed ones, make is not knowing how to layer their clothing. Now, in the fall and winter, you definitely need to layer your clothing for insulation as well as ventilation. But there's also another thing that you need to layer, which we'll talk about in a second. When we're talking about you laying your clothes for insulation and ventilation during the fall and winter, a lot of guys make the mistake, myself included, of thinking that you need to have a lot of warm clothing on because you're going to be stepping out into the cold. But one of the things that I realized when I was in New York is if I layer up too much, I'm talking about thermals or long johns, a sweater, a sport coat, some heavy tweed or corduroy trousers, and an overcoat. By the time I would walk down 2 blocks, I would be sweating. And then when I found myself sitting still, I'd be freezing my ass off because of all the moisture that was being held and the wind still cutting through to my bones on those cold days in New York or in Chicago. You know what I'm talking about. So what I had to start learning how to do was to layer items that were going to breathe well while still being insulating and keeping me comfortable. That way, when my body heat started to rise, I was still able to release some of that energy and maintain a cool level. Now, it's not as easy in the Midwest or in the Northeast, but especially if you live in the southern states or on the West Coast, you definitely need to regulate your temperature by layering clothes. So the best way to do this is to think of your trousers as something that is heavy but is not dense. So the reason why a lot of guys like wearing flannel pants is because flannel is going to drape heavily. It's going to be matted together because flannel is just different fibers essentially pressed together. And so it will drape great, but it's not a heavy, heavy fabric. It can be, but most of the time guys aren't getting heavy flannel pants. So they will drape well, but because of how they are hanging, they will allow for more air. And I get it. It's fall, winter. You want to layer all those different items, but just think about where you're going to go in those. If you are about to go get in your car, you're essentially putting on garments to take them right off when you could just throw on a dope sport coat that will work with everything else, get in your car, turn up the heat, and be fine. And most guys in the South are walking from their garage to their car, from their car to their office. So that means at max, you're going to be spending 150 to 200 feet walking to your car. It's not really worth it as far as layering is concerned, especially with cars with automatic starts. So I would tell you to be more strategic in getting heavier sport coats instead of layering it with an additional top coat. So the other side of this mistake that a lot of guys make is not layering color, texture, and pattern to their look. Now, guys will do this with monochrome patterns. This is the easiest way for me to put that on display for you. But just think, if you had a blue jacket, let's say a sport coat, a blue top, and then a blue pair of pants on, that can look pretty boring. It can look pretty basic, and it can look like you don't really know what you're doing in some cases. But try this on, see how it fits you. What if you put on a serge twill jacket? That's what this is, right? So it has a little bit of a diagonal texture to it. You then pair that with a chambray denim shirt, and then you pair that with a pair of those blue flannel trousers that we're talking about. Well, now not only do you have diversity in the types of colors that you're putting on, or in the range of the colors that you're putting on, but you also now have different textures for people to pay attention to. Now let's take that a step further. What if instead of the flannel trousers, you added a pattern like a Glen check or even a puppy tooth or a houndstooth pattern. Well, now you have even more nuance that makes the overall ensemble that much more interesting. It will layer the look, and that in turn will create interest and intrigue that will be a touch point for conversation, or at least for introduction. All right, so the next mistake is thinking that all clothing is supposed to fit the same. So something interesting happened probably about 20 years ago when I first was getting into the clothing game. This is when every guy was wearing the super baggy clothes, and we're actually swinging back to that style now. And a guy came in, he had bought some urban clothes, so like polo, Jabot jeans, you remember Jabots, and some sneakers. And then he also needed a suit for a religious celebration of some sort. I don't remember. And so when we got it, he was like, nah, man, I need this size. Now, the size that he thought he needed was about two sizes too big. And the reason why he thought that was because he had just bought a polo and jeans that were two sizes too big. And so when I was trying to educate him on the clothing, I started to realize I wasn't really conveying that these were two different spaces and scenes that he was going to be in. Now, I've seen the same thing even with well dressed men. It just goes to a slightly higher level. They believe that if they have a shirt or a jacket that has raglan sleeves, and so that means the sleeves are not finished on a seam, but that it kind of goes up to the shoulder, that's going to fit the same way as if the jacket was composed with sleeves on the seam, and they're going to fit different. This is going to be different if you're thinking about your leisure pants versus your dress pants, or jeans versus slacks. Everything is not going to fit the same because the functionality of it, while seemingly the same, has different attributes. And so it's important for you to understand that if you're wearing a sport coat, it may not fit the same as your suit jacket. Now, this could be determined by the fabric, this could be determined by the manufacturer, this could be determined by the way that the fabric tends to move with the garment. If it has a heavy drape, or if it is meant to be more stiff and rigid, right? So, either one of those things we have to pay attention to so that we know how the garment is going to fit us. And the more aware you are of those situations, the more you will find comfort in what you're putting on because you know how it's going to fit and move with you. So, this next mistake is something that I struggled, I often say now, strength train through, and that I see a lot of well dressed, cool dudes trying to navigate through when they're first getting their style started. And that is not sticking to a specific genre when they're getting started. Now, what do I mean? Well, a lot of guys will start out dressing well because of something that's inspired them. So let's say they started out in the hype beast space, and so they were going to buy all of this cool new stuff from the designers that's out, right? And so they go and get those items, and then they say, oh, well, if I'm stylish, then I have to go to the sartorial side or the rock and roll side or the hip hop side. Whatever is popular in culture, that's what they feel like they have to align themselves with. So what they do is they go and get all of these different clothes, but they don't really have an understanding of what it is that they're purchasing. Listen, if you're going to be a hype beast, and I hope that if you are a hype beast at this age, you have an understanding of why you are, you dive deep into understanding the hype beast culture. Pause. Right. So if you're going to be in the hype beast culture, understand what something at a formal level, this doesn't have to mean black tie, but whatever the dressed up version of hype beast looks would be, what a professional look would be, what a social or a leisure look would be, and then what a romantic or interactive look would be. There's this cat on Instagram who is like a grandfather. He's a hype beast type guy. He wears all the designer level layers and does some really cool stuff with it. It's not my taste. It's not something I would ever do, but I really appreciate his ability to put these looks together with him and his wife, right? So that he knows how to work through different looks when he needs to show up in a dope way. Hold on. I made a mistake. Thinking that was charged. So if you start to really think about your space that you want to be in, then you can really cultivate a wardrobe that is going to be interchangeable. And this is actually one of the easiest ways for you to create a cohesive and interchangeable wardrobe for that genre. And then you can move into another area of interest. Now, this can be a very difficult thing, I get, because it seems boring or static. But what you're actually doing is creating something that people can align you with, and it will help develop your signature style and get you to the understanding of those other elements of color, of texture, of layering, so that they work to your benefit. So the next mistake that even well-dressed men make is not considering the story that they want to tell with colors. So when I'm talking to guys about their color story, right, understanding which colors are going to be best for them, a lot of times I will walk them through what their foundational color is going to do, what their complementary color is going to do, and then what the accessorized colors are going to do. Now, that doesn't mean that you're just throwing those colors on for accessories. It's just a term that I use. But for instance, if a guy's primary color is going to be gray, well, gray is going to communicate non-emotion. It's going to be even killed. It's not black, it's right, it's gray, right? It is going to be middle of the ground. It doesn't lean towards one thing or the other. And so if a guy is putting that down as his base, there is a level of refinement there, but it also is going to communicate a very business oriented type of expression. So if you're wearing this to a social space, don't be surprised if people feel a little restricted or constrained in talking to you if that's the only color that you're wearing. It's better for you to have that as a base, but then complement that with, let's say, a pink shirt, because pink is going to invite likability, friendliness, lightheartedness when you are interacting. So then you're starting to create a complementary story for people to build upon. And this is one of the most important points that a lot of guys overlook, is creating a narrative of color before they step out. So one of the biggest mistakes that a lot of guys make, we all are guilty of it at some point in our style journey, is overcrowding our closet. The interesting thing that's happened for me is as I get older, I start to realize I don't really want or need as much, because I'm starting to find my own lane professionally, socially, romantically, now having one person that I need to appeal to and to please, if you will, and also in how we move together. So I don't really require a lot of pieces. Now, if you're a style guy like we are, I know that you're still going to have more clothes than, let's say, the minimalist, but there still needs to be a point of which you say, hey, I don't need any more. And if I'm going to continue to acquire, I should discard while I bring on. And the reason being is because once you start to have a lot of clothes, even if you enjoy all of them, you start to find yourself not wearing pieces, and that clutter will often cause confusion. You'll hear me say that more and more through these videos, because when you are confused, even if everything works together, if you have too much that you're looking at, you're going to find that you make no choice at all. And all that means is that you keep on grabbing the same thing, which is going to get you to a signature style anyway, and help you to realize that you don't need a lot of those items. But the more consolidated and concise your wardrobe is, the better it is for helping you articulate your aesthetic and also who you are when you're stepping out. And this will create the consistency and confidence that we talked about in the sticking to your script video. If you haven't seen that, check it out up here, one of those. Now, the thing that I love about a missed take is that you can always reshoot. And this may be a little bit of a bonus for guys. If you mess up your look or you've made one of these mistakes, then take a deep breath, man. You're just superficially suffering. Because even if you made that mistake, at a big time situation, at a big event. And if you've worn it poorly to a club or a lounge, there's other lounges around your town or your city, unless you live in Podunk, West Philadelphia, right? If that's the case, try it again, reshoot it with the solutions that I provided for you, and watch your style elevate with the understanding that you're probably going to make another mistake once you elevate in that space, because this is a story and it allows for you to edit, for you to elevate, and for you to continue to express yourself for where you are. So I was talking to a homie as I was working on these videos, right? And I was telling him that I would plan on wearing this blazer a lot. And it was kind of because I wanted to do this kind of Mr. Rogers stepping into a dressing room type of vibe, but I didn't necessarily have the time to do all those things, right? To do that introduction. And so we started talking about me wearing this red blazer. And I told him that I was wrestling with it because, in truth, I felt like I needed to have this massive wardrobe. And I got a few clothes, but I started to realize that's not what the objective of this channel is. It's not about me being an influencer or showing you how big my wardrobe is. It's actually to help you develop and cultivate your own. And one of the mistakes that I've made, that I've been working through, is not trying to keep up with the Joneses or with anybody else. First of all, I don't even know who the Joneses are. You know them? I know A. Jones, but I don't know who the Joneses are, right? And so we're trying to keep up appearances to impress people that we don't know or we don't like. And we're doing all these things like dressing to impress instead of dressing to leave an impression, right? There is a difference between impressing somebody and leaving an imprint with your authenticity. And one of the things that I've learned from several stylish guys like Lino Iluzzi, or a gentleman who is local here who happens to wear the same thing over and over again, is the most stylish guys are not trying to impress anybody. They're trying to leave their imprint. And so they find themselves utilizing the same types of looks over and over again, because those then create an association. And that's why I'm focused on fixing that mistake and cultivating a wardrobe that really starts to solidify my signature style. But before we do, I want us to really take a look at ourselves and to determine what our body type actually says about us and how to wear clothes that look best for us. So make sure you check out the next video so you can make sure that you're getting the right pieces for your body.